Welcome, everyone. Today we have Marek Olszewski. Did I say it correctly?
Oh, yeah. The way I recommend folks pronounce it is to think of three words, all, ALL, chefs as in cooks, and then ski as in downhill skiing. So
I love
Olszewski.
that. Olszewski.
Olszewski. Nice.
That is so helpful. Thank you so much.
I don't think it was spelled that way. It turns out it's spelled that way in Polish, but not in English.
I love it. Well, welcome, Marek. We're so happy to have you. Marek is the co-founder and CTO of cLabs, which is one of the companies contributing to the Celo protocol, and president of Valora, which is an easy-to-use mobile wallet built on Celo. Earlier, Marek founded Loku, a machine learning venture-backed company that was acquired by GoDaddy. He's also an MIT PhD alumni and former Facebook fellow who has previously worked at Google, Microsoft Research, and Sun Labs. So how do you sleep? Like when do you get sleep in with such an impressive background, Marek?
Yeah, great question. Sadly, not enough sleep, especially last night.
Oh my God.
I think my co-founder tweeted something to the effect of, everyone said things would slow down in a bear market, but as far as we've been able to see, that's not the case. When nap? Question mark. I think
Yeah.
that definitely summarizes a lot of how people feel in our ecosystem. Everyone's just so excited. Everyone's still building really enthusiastically.
Sami, would you say that that's been the case for you as well? Have you slowed down or sped up in this bear market?
I also feel like things have kind of picked up in terms of building. I think that sentiment is down at the moment. I think the amount of people like buying crypto and getting into crypto feels a little bit down, but the speed of building feels up, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. So Sami, before we started recording, you said that you're super familiar with Celo and that Transak actually has some affiliations with Celo. So do you want to explain for the audience kind of what our relationship is with Celo and when you first learned about them, when they first came on your radar?
Yeah, so we first found out about Celo. I'm not actually sure how we got introduced. It might have been through consensus or something like that, and kind of spoke with the team and was just very impressed with like the mission driven aspect of Celo, which I'm sure Marek will get more into later on, and kind of saw it as something that would gain a lot of adoption. And we joined what I believe is called the Prosperity for Alliance and became an on-ramp for Celo. So I think we were like the first ones to actually list Celo assets like Celo and Celo Dollar. I think back then it was even called Celo Gold. It's like two years ago, something like that. And since then we've kind of worked with Celo in various ways and with the Valora app and things like that. So we're just kind of part of the ecosystem. We try to support them and help to onboard people into their ecosystem by allowing them to buy Celo assets with fiat using cards, bank transfers, other local payment methods.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time to explain that. Now, Marek, so I come from a creative writing background. So one of my, I think one of the reasons why I have job security in the crypto world, and also one of my biggest pet peeves in the crypto world, is that I go onto these websites often and it's all tech language. It's all just like, we're the first generation layer 2 protocol and everything's very like, everything's very developer centric. The Celo website is not at all. The Celo website feels like a poem. It's very like beautiful, and it's very focused on values and humanity, and even the name Celo comes from the Esperanto word for purpose. So I think that's my first question. I'm going to indulge a little bit in like, can you talk about how your values have shaped the culture of the company a little bit, and then take us on a journey into the tech side of it, because that was one question that I had when I was looking at your website, was like, how do these values then create the technology that is making these ideals a reality?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe before I jump into that, I also just wanted to thank you guys for having me and for being early supporters of the ecosystem, for joining that alliance that Sami just mentioned. Yeah, I mean, I think what we're trying to accomplish is big and ambitious, and the only way we do it is as an ecosystem of companies working together. And so it's just really wonderful to have Transak be part of that journey. And I'm really glad you like the website. It is very
It's
different,
poet approved.
and I think it's different because um, we are, I would say, a somewhat different ecosystem from a lot of the different layer ones that have popped up over the last few years. I think we are certainly much more mission driven than many others. Celo's mission is to build a financial system that creates the conditions for prosperity for everyone, and that is big and difficult for us to accomplish. And the only way we can accomplish that is again as really as an ecosystem, as a movement of companies working together. And you asked how that's shaped kind of the community and the technology. The story is really interesting. When we first started, I teamed up with folks that I had worked with in the past, that I had started a company with in the past, and we wanted to do something really big and mission driven. Um, really, crypto for us was yes, it was a really exciting technology that I've been following, and then I happened to have done a PhD or worked on a PhD in an area that was very relevant to scaling blockchains. But what really excited us was more the self sovereignty, the self custodial aspects of crypto that enable anyone to custody funds, even if they don't have a government recognized ID. This was the thing that really drew us in, and in fact, when we first started, we actually wanted to build a wallet on top of Ethereum that could be a global Venmo. That was kind of our starting point. That was how we initially thought was the best way to kind of work towards bringing prosperity to everyone.
And can I ask?
But we quickly learned that
Can I just interject and ask, like, did that come from a personal experience that you or one of your founding members had, or did it come from a place of like, for lack of a better word, like idealism, right? Like wanting for the ideal world to have this, or was there kind of a personal experience that that really served as a motivating desire for that?
Yeah, really great question. I mean, I think for all of us, we wanted to spend this portion of our careers working on something meaningful and something that we could dedicate the rest of our lives to. And we wanted it to be more than just a company. We wanted it to be
Something in service.
yeah. And I think I have an international background. My parents are from Poland, but I grew up in Singapore. My co-founder Rene grew up in Eastern Germany. He's traveled a bunch. He worked at one point for the World Bank in Venezuela, and I think we've definitely seen firsthand the differences between what we're used to and what we take for granted in Europe and North America, and I think a lot of people do take that for granted, and I think we've seen amazing technological leapfrogging happen with mobile money initially in Kenya, and then kind of growing from there. And we really thought that this really exciting technology that we're working on has an opportunity to again leapfrog again. And it's not just with financial inclusion, right? I think 1.7 billion people are financially excluded today. With today's infrastructure, 1.1 billion don't have government recognized IDs. So of course, crypto is a great way of reaching folks that in today's system are fully excluded. But programmability of money actually allows us to do so much more. And a lot of what the ecosystem now is working on is not just about financial inclusion, but also about how do we fight climate change? How do we build regenerative systems that have positive externalities instead of negative externalities? I think there's
so much there. And I love it because there's this very practical side of it too. I think it's easy to get theoretical or perhaps even like a little bit lofty when you talk about like the high level vision, but there's also this like super practical element. And I think every person who's ever, like you said, lived in multiple countries or have relatives in different countries, they just instantly picked up that really practical application and use cases of crypto without it necessarily being something that they thought of as like a service or like a service oriented mission of any kind. It was just like, I want to be able to send money cheap, with fewer fees and faster to the people that need it. Sami, were you going to jump in? It looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I have a question. Marek, how would you describe Celo and how would you describe what you do? Because I know you straddle like several organizations and alliances and stuff like that. How would you describe it in terms of like, is it a nonprofit? Is it a for-profit? Is it a DAO? Is it a, it's kind of hard for me to place all of those things about
That's such a great question.
And not that they're mutually exclusive.
And I think our listeners really benefit from that question because we've had on people from DAOs, we've had on people from corporations, and there are all of these legal questions that come into place when you're thinking about how to structure your business. So that's a great question, Sami.
Yeah, I think I would think of Celo as a layer one, just like Polygon and Avalanche and some of these others, but with a difference that we're focused on not just all the exciting things that are happening in Web3, right? There are people doing a lot of interesting DeFi on Celo and a lot of interesting NFT stuff on Celo, but we're also really focused on things that excite us from a mission perspective. That can be creating really amazing mobile money like products, or it could be related to regenerative finance and helping fight climate change. I think Celo has attracted historically builders who care about these things and are interested in using Web3 as a way of helping make progress on these really, really important kind of global issues. But at the heart of it, Celo is just a EVM compatible layer one with some absolutely amazing technology that really rivals, chains like Avalanche and Algorand. And that's what makes everything, run so smoothly. Celo's never been down. In the 2 years of operation, it's run from the get-go entirely by the community. The Celo Foundation or cLabs has never run any validator nodes, which is not the norm. Surprisingly, a lot of these more recent layer one proof of stake networks seem to have a big percentage of the network run by kind of the teams that initially worked on these networks. And so we're a highly decentralized platform that's again EVM compatible and then has some really nice bonus features that make it particularly good for mobile products. And we can get into that in a sec, but yeah, that's how I would articulate it.
So let's say I'm a developer and I'm developing an app, and I would love if you can give like a very specific use case of like an app that someone might build. What would get me excited about building on Celo, and like what are going to be those features that are there in my toolkit in order to achieve my mission, like whatever that is.
Yeah. If you're a developer and you want to build really easy to use Web3 products that work, that reach billions of people, likely on mobile devices, then Celo is really the platform for you. And the reason for that is, Celo is fully EVM compatible. So we're compatible with, the smart contracting language that is, has, clearly won out as kind of the language that, there's the most tooling out there for, the most formal verification kind of offerings, the most audit firms that support it, just the most resources online if you need help and get stuck. And so everything starts for us with being fully EVM compatible. But there are these bonus features. So, a lot of people are talking about mobile being really important right now in Web3. And, it's great. I mean, we've been talking about this for the last kind of 4 years. And, it's one thing to try to partner with a phone company and try to develop a phone, but it's another thing to actually have features that are actually relevant to mobile, ingrained directly in the platform. And so that's what Celo does. I would say there's 2 really nice mobile features, and then one additional feature that I think from an ease of use perspective is just really critical. On the mobile front, none of these other platforms that are talking about targeting mobile have like clients that realistically work on mobile devices. If you want to target mobile devices, you need and want to do it in a Web3 way, that means that you have to allow these mobile devices to be able to sync with the network in a fully trustless manner. And sadly, that's not the status quo today. Everyone uses RPC endpoints for their mobile apps and web pages for that matter. These RPC endpoints are 100% prone to surveillance and censorship. So a lot of what we gain from building on Web3, we're actually giving up instantly as soon as we choose that way of building the apps.
That's really fascinating. Do people know that? Like, is that common knowledge?
I think developers know. I think users don't know. Users don't care.
Yeah.
For the most part, unless they're.
Well, I mean, I can speak for us, like, people women and people who are concerned about like what just happened here in the United States with Roe v. Wade. Like, privacy is a huge concern right now. Everyone's saying like we need to encrypt our biometric data somehow, because even just things like having sleep tracker apps could potentially be criminalized. These are just conversations that people are having now that Roe v. Wade has been rolled back. So I think it's on people's radar now more than it ever has been before. And even just those conversations has made me start to go, wait a minute, nothing on my phone is totally, fully 100% encrypted. Nothing. And so there's so many different holes, I think, in the way that we use technology, and nothing is consistently across the board encrypted. So anyway, sorry to interrupt and go on a tangent, but just to
it's a really important tangent, and it's crazy that we live in these times, and that these are the things that in the US people have to worry about.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just nuts. And you're right. And so I think these things are becoming more top of mind for people, just like suddenly stability became top of mind once, Terra imploded.
Right.
I think these are the things that nobody thinks about until they need to.
But the question is, are we willing to really change our lifestyles and consumer choices around these issues that we sometimes have the privilege of not having to care about, and sometimes we don't have that privilege,
Right. I mean, this is where I think developers have to come in and help, and developers care about this, right? I think developers are thoughtful. They pick platforms that are decentralized, the most decentralized, and ultimately, they become good stewards for their users, and in terms of having to change behavior, luckily, Celo has a really nice proof of stake consensus protocol that uses some really new cryptography, and the end result is you can actually create zk snark proofs that prove in effect that a header is part of the chain. And so that allows you to really, with just a few kilobytes, sync and get the latest header, which then gives you the kind of Merkle root of all state in the chain. And that allows you to then verify all state in the chain using Merkle proofs. And because it's so lightweight, you can, in theory, build applications where the user isn't the wiser, and you're building things that are fully decentralized. And that's really exciting, and that's, I think, one thing that right from the bat we knew that if we wanted to target mobile devices, we had to invest in, and this was a huge investment. This took years of effort. Doing anything with snarks is not easy, and doing it correctly is even harder.
So I want to kind of guide us a little bit, because I want to hear your story, but we're talking about so many interesting things. So I'm going to try to keep the long view in mind, that I want to get us back to your founding story. But there are so many things that we have to talk about first. So, okay. So you're talking about user behavior, consumer behavior. Are we willing to change our behavior? And we know that Solana just came out with the idea. I don't think they've protocoled it yet, but the idea for the mobile phone, right? The Solana phone. So can you talk, do we need a whole new phone in order to interact with blockchain and move into Web3, and talk about kind of how you guys made your decision to not necessarily present a new phone, but to rather focus on the dev side of it and creating these very particular tokens that work on the existing smartphones that we are already using. Maybe talk a little bit about that tension, and then I'll let you and Sami riff on the tech side of it.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, it's obviously, I think, an interesting announcement. It does seem a little puzzling, because the things that Web3 has to do well to become mobile first, in my mind, don't really require a mobile phone. I think a lot of really big companies have tried to launch their own mobile phones. You've had Amazon try to do it, obviously Microsoft as well. These are, extremely large companies with effectively unlimited resources that weren't able to make it happen. And so,
so what makes
if Solana can pull it off,
yeah, what makes them think that they can pull it off? I know you can't speak for them,
I don't know,
but I'm curious to know. What? Just does the market suggest that, from your perspective, being somebody who is building a mobile first blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to speak to that, but what I can speak to is, I don't think it's important to launch your own phone, right? I think what's important is that you build mobile applications that reach people. Why are people excited about mobile phones? Not because we want to sell mobile phones to people, but because people have mobile phones. Billions of them, right? There's 6 billion plus smartphones out there that have active internet connections today.
That's like one for every person on the planet.
Yeah, not everyone has a smartphone. Some people have more than one, which is why that number ends up being close to the population now. But still, that is a lot of people with smartphone devices today. I think there's 8 billion mobile devices with an active subscription. So that means over 75% are now smartphones. Smartphone penetration is just through the roof. And I'm more excited about building for those phones and for those users than for users who will one day own a new device that will have its own I guess, app store that allows it to compete against kind of the restrictive wall garden kind of policies of existing app stores. I think, that's where the users are, that's where the need is, and these devices are plenty capable. I think what's not really working is people haven't built consensus protocols that can actually sync in a trustless way on these devices. And people aren't really thinking about developing applications in a mobile first way.
Sami,
Web 2 is done mobile first.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to actually ask from the on-ramp perspective, Sami, are you noticing that mobile is kind of an afterthought for a lot of the dApps that Transak is partnering with? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I guess from the stats that we see, it does seem like more people are kind of on-ramping into mobile than into desktop. And it's interesting because like a lot of people, when they release like a new protocol, when they release like a new NFT marketplace or game or something like that, it seems that people like often go desktop first, which I mean, like as a developer, from a selfish point of view, kind of makes sense because you've got like more real estate to play with. You like you can like build your app and you can have like several things on the page. So, but yeah, I really like that Marek and the team have kind of taken this bet of like, it is going to be mobile first, which like, correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth here. It seems to be like quite a strong stance that you've taken. Also seems to be quite evident from your brand and from the activities that you're doing. So yeah, I really respect that kind of stance that you've taken. I think, we've seen similar things when like Facebook went like mobile all in, right? And I think you kind of like went down that route. One question I'd be interested to hear, Marek, is like, there's all these perks and all these benefits of building on Celo. Can you run us through like a very specific use case of like either a real app or like a theoretical app, and like what, how that would be able to service people and how that would use the tools in this toolkit?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just to round off those extra features that Celo has, probably should have listed them before started going into them one by one. But, we talked about the light client. The other thing that Celo does really well is it leverages what people have on their devices. That's one of the most important things about building mobile first. And so that means leveraging contact lists. So Celo has a decentralized phone verification protocol, which means that you can actually receive funds at your phone number, which means that people can send you funds if you are in their contact list. And then finally, Celo lets you pay for transaction fees with tokens that have been allow listed through on-chain governance. And that means that you can, and there's 3 stable coins now have been allow listed. And so you can actually send payments and pay for those transaction fees in those stable coins.
Which are what?
And so Celo dollar, Celo euro, and Celo Brazilian real.
Okay. Wow.
There's a lot of...
So I could text. So this is kind of going back to the global Venmo idea that you were talking about. Like I could text my friend just through texting, send crypto. Can you talk a little bit about how that would work? Like, would you need the wallet address in order to do that? Like, walk us through that process a little bit.
Yeah. So on a traditional wallet, you would obviously need a wallet address to send someone money. That means that they have to go and create the wallet before you send the money. If you look at Web 2 companies, that's not how they work. They let you send money before the recipient signs up, right? Like Coinbase famously does this. Actually, the way I got onboarded into crypto was Brian Armstrong at a music festival sent me some Bitcoin using exactly that flow. But it's centralized, right? And so it'd be really nice to, have it be decentralized, and actually, luckily we already have it. So after 4 years of building this, you can now experience this flow. If you sign up with Valora, which is a mobile wallet on Celo, you can send money to someone even before they've signed up. And the way it works is you send money to their phone number. The wallet will send the funds to an escrow smart contract that can only be where the funds can only be released once the recipient signs up with their phone number. And we do this in a way that is very privacy focused.
Whew. Sorry, I just love that term, escrow smart contract. Just like, I'm just gonna like let that sink in. I love words, obviously, but that's just such a smart idea.
It's a good word, and the experience is literally that the funds are waiting there for you, and then when the recipient signs up and verifies their phone number, they verify it with 3 texts that come from 3 randomly selected participants on the network.
And this replaces the need for anybody who accepts tips through Venmo to ask their patrons or customers to use an encrypted emoji instead of writing tips. Like I have a lot of people like here in New York, a lot of people do that, like the hairdresser or whatever. They'll ask you to tip them on Venmo, but they don't want to, I mean, this is illegal, but they don't want to claim all of their tips, or they just don't want the government to necessarily be able to see how they're using Venmo. I'm not going to out anybody. But they'll say like, you know, just write books or just like use an emoji or whatever. And I'm not saying that they're all not claiming their tips. I'm sure that they are doing their taxes in a way that's just fine. But the point is that they want control over that. Like they want to be able to claim that without Venmo doing it on their behalf.
And this kind of ease of use can be tied in with compliance and accounting.
Yes.
And eventually, right? Okay, I want to dig into this. Brian
yes,
Armstrong
I'm so glad actually, because now we get to go into the story.
We like way past that. That's like a really cool story. So like, was he trying to hire you and like get you to join Coinbase, or like were you friends? Like because that's a pretty cool story.
No, we met for the first time then. It was an Outside Lands. It was the Outside Lands Festival, which happens yearly in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And yeah, we met for the first time that day, 2013. And he, you know, was very excited about the company he was building. And I think he was onboarding as many people as he could, you know, feasibly do by himself. And so, and the way he was doing that was giving some Bitcoin to people. It was a very small amount at the time. Obviously, it's grown to be actually not so insignificant anymore. But it was, yeah, really. I think it was a great experience. And you know, he's a really great guy. It was fun. It was a good
he
time.
doing this like in a booth or something, like on behalf of Coinbase, or was he just doing it from friend to friend?
No.
Or you like you were like,
we need details.
No, I don't. Coinbase was. I think they were one of my former employees from my last startup. Actually, around after this, went to Coinbase, and I think he was employee number like 12 or something. So this means that they were less than 12 employees at the time when he did this. So I don't think they were big enough for a booth.
This kind of sounds a little bit like Sami's story of paying people. Was it 1 ETH or 0.1 ETH on Reddit? 0.1 ETH on Reddit to ask them for information about dApps.
It's like do things that don't scale, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. That's how you bootstrap. That's how you turn smoke into fire.
So I got a question for you, Mark. How do you measure success? Like, do you have a North Star metric? You know, different companies have different metrics, right? Like, so Spotify is number of hours of music listened to. Airbnb is number of nights stayed. And then eBay is like gross merchandise value of what's going through that platform. And like all of those metrics, like eventually kind of tie into revenue, right? Because the idea of like a traditional business is to make money eventually for the shareholders. So does that kind of concept exist in Celo and in Valora?
Yeah, I mean, I think every company in the ecosystem has their own North Star. Valora being a mobile wallet, I think, as you would expect, has North Star is related to active users. But cLabs, which is a company that focuses more on public goods related offerings in the Celo ecosystem, their North Star is gross Celo product. So it's you can think of it as the GDP of the of the platform. And the reason for that, versus just focusing on transaction counts or TVL, is that neither of those two are perfect metrics for measuring real economic activity on the platform. But GDP has almost a blend of both, not quite, but it's somewhat analogous to that. And so we thought it was a really good.
And is that GDP sitting there and just like total value locked type thing, or is
can you
that
tell us a little bit about how
like being
the calculations for both are distinct?
Yeah, so TVL is just looking at how much value is locked in smart contracts. Counting kind of transactions or transaction volume is just looking at the actual transactions happening on the chain and the volume them. A GDP is almost analogous to kind of the product of both. And so you can drive the metrics by driving either of those two things, which is nice because, to date, a lot of focus on these platforms have been building single player mode products, right? I think one of the greatest innovation behind, DEXs is that you don't need a counterparty to actually use it. You can use it in a single player mode. And a lot of DeFi today is very single player, and that's certainly easier to bootstrap than multiplayer offerings. But if we think about crypto eventually leapfrogging, traditional finance, like what do people use traditional finance for? Well, a big part of it is actually payments, right? A big part of it is actually sending money, and that's a multiplayer mode kind of product that requires a lot of transactions. And so if you just capture TVL, you're not going to capture if you just track TVL, you're not going to capture how well you're doing as a actual payment network. And so that's something that we wanted to capture as well in this North Star metric. And that's something that Celo is particularly, I would say, also amenable to, and it's a really great platform for, because it's highly scalable, because you can pay for transaction fees with tokens. It means you can actually send stable coins and pay for that transaction fee in that stable coin. It's just such a nice platform for payments. And in fact, actually, there's a company called Amber Group, started by one of the early employees at Telegram, that built this kind of self-custodial card. It's a smart card with a private key inside this little chip that's in the card. Looks like a credit card, but you can't use it on the Visa or MasterCard network. Instead, you can use it with Amber Group's kind of custom POS, where you can literally tap to pay exactly like you do with your credit card today using NFC. It sends a transaction up to the chip signs the transaction, and then it sends it back with NFC. It all happens in the span of a second. The experience is exactly like Visa, but you're actually transacting and settling on chain. That's really, really exciting. No other network is focusing on building these kinds of experiences. And really going after, real world use cases, like payments, where, again, I think we take it for granted that not everyone has the convenience of, being able to pay with your credit card in this super easy way. Self-custodial wallets are a really great way to bring that to everyone. But you have to make it really easy. You have to make it super seamless. And these folks are just really crushing it on that front.
I love that, because in theory, somebody who doesn't necessarily have a credit score or just doesn't want to use credit, or someone who doesn't have a bank, traditional bank with a ATM debit card that works on the Visa network, could basically have the same experience of paying, but it's coming out of there.
And the fees are negligible.
They're their own bank.
And it's composable. so anyone can build on top of this. Unlike Visa, you can't like plug into Visa and as a third party, like offer NFT incentives to people who buy from, I don't know, fair trade coffee shops, right? But in one of the beauties of Web3 is that all of this is fully composable. Someone could actually offer that benefit to this card that you're holding. It can be a different company than the company that issued it. And that's, I think, where things get really exciting is which,
And you don't need to ask permission, right? You just go ahead and you look up the docs and
yeah,
you just do it, right? So it could be like some kid in their dorm room just decides like, okay, I'm going to build something on top of this, right? You don't need to have like a compliance department or anything like that. Well, maybe you do in some cases, but you can pretty much just go ahead and build, right?
Yeah, and people are working on compliance solutions too. That can plug into these things as well. And so, the thing that made DeFi so exciting, all the composability, all that's going to continue, but it's going to continue in the payment space. And, it's not just, building on top of payments that's going to be exciting. It's even the actual underlying currencies that people are transacting with. And so I mentioned Celo dollar as a stable coin that you can use to pay for gas with. Celo dollars are backed in part by refi assets. The goal is to get to something like 40% backing, but for now it's a lot less than that. But when the coin gets to that level of collateralization by things like carbon offset credits or tokenized trees or other carbon sequestering assets, we're going to live in a world where you can not only vote with your dollar, you're going to be able to vote with which dollar you use to pay for things. And that's going to be really exciting, right? You're going to be able to hopefully, with one of these cards, like go and tap to pay, and actually explicitly say that, yeah, I want to pay with a stable coin that is helping fight climate change. Like, that's important for me. And that really small change in behavior can have really massive impact. You don't have to donate anything. You just have to change what you're using to transact. It sounds like science fiction, but it's happening.
It's
like
superior to rounding up your dollar at the grocery store to donate to whatever kind of charity or organization you want to donate to.
Yeah, or do both, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
truly.
I think. So yeah, all of this sounds like science fiction, but it's around the corner. It's an exciting world.
I always ask people how long they think it's going to take, and I've gotten lots of different answers. But before I ask that question, I want to go back to Sami's point about, like, you can build on these platforms, and you may or may not want a compliance department. Can you guys put your heads together and think of maybe two different examples? One where somebody in their dorm room might just want to build like a protocol on top of this new network and wouldn't necessarily be thinking about scaling or compliance, compared to maybe a company or an organization that would really want to be building with this like compliance minded use case in mind.
Sure. I mean, if you're offering custodial solutions to merchants to accept these assets, then you're going to have a lot of licenses in a lot of countries that you're operating in, and you're going to have a very strong compliance function that helps you with all of the different compliance needs of your customers, the merchants that are accepting these payments.
So this would be like if you were and you wanted to accept payments in a store, like in a corporate store or something like that. Like if this was at the Gap or one of the big global stores wanted to start accepting.
If you're selling offerings to those companies, then yeah. If you're just a mom and pop shop that has a self-custodial wallet, then I think the regulation that applies to you is going to be a little different than if you're a custodial solution selling to other merchants. But I think if you're a kid in the dorm room and you're excited about this future and you want to do something on your own, then there's a lot of things that you can do that probably require less effort on the regulation front. I mean, I think we know that in many markets, NFTs are regulated as commodities, and if you're minting NFTs and offering people badges or various incentives using them to maybe change their behavior in some way or to reward certain types of behavior, you're going to have a different amount of regulatory compliance work to do than again that custodial product. So I mean, I think it really depends what you're building, to what extent it's self-custodial, to what extent it touches fiat, and of course everything changes over time too, right? I think there's a lot of fat infants and regulations that are currently in flight, and all of this can change. And I'm sure Sami is much more well versed in all of this than I am. So maybe I'll let you kind of chime in as well.
Yeah, I think that a payment is a remarkably simple thing to do from a tech and product point of view without all the compliance fraud stuff, right? So a payment, really, you're just like moving a number from like one register to another register. It's like Megan has $100, Marek has $50. Megan wants to send $20 to Marek. You just like subtract 20 from Megan's account and add 20 to Marek's account. It's not like rocket science, right? I think the really hard thing is like the security behind that and the compliance behind that, right? So firstly, how do you stop someone from like taking Megan's $100 without her permission, or Marek's? And then also, how do you stop bad people from like sending money on that network, right? So like if someone just like sold a bunch of drugs and then wants to like launder that money, then how do you stop them from doing that? Or if someone wants to scam someone, right? Then how do you stop them from doing that? And I think that's something that like a lot of people don't think about when they start like a very early stage company, back to this kind of kid in the dorm room example. But when you start to get scale and your platform starts to get mass adoption, like people inevitably do try to do those things on your platform. So the whole idea that compliance is not necessary is totally misguided. It's like 100% necessary.
So it's a matter of when, not if, or...
Yeah, no, I mean, like Marek says, like you can't just like set up like a custodian company and expect to get like mass adoption and not to get picked up by regulators. And I think rightly so.
Definitely.
In a lot of ways. I mean, I think regulation can be done always better, but and like what I guess what Marek's technology and what Celo is doing kind of takes care of the decentralization part and takes care of the like, how do we stop someone from double spending Megan's money or something like that, right? But then we need a whole bunch of other building blocks, right? So some of those building blocks is what Transak is building in terms of like handling the compliance around exchanging fiat to crypto. We also handle a lot of the compliance around KYC and money transmission and those kind of things, and we abstract that away from companies. But I would like to see a world in which these problems are kind of broken down into developer toolkits, and they can somewhat abstract that away from like maybe the cool innovative stuff, which is kind of riffing on this composability part of what Marek is saying. I think that like having composable compliance and composable security and these kind of things like baked into a developer toolkit is going to be the thing that really empowers people, and I think that's very, very important.
I love that. Well, we usually end with the question of what will it take for somebody to become the next master of Web3? And Sami, you kind of just gave us a really good segue into it. So is there anything else you want to add onto that about what it like for somebody who is interested in building that composable toolkit? Are there any particular areas where you feel like there's a big opening for people to come in and start building those kinds of tools? And also, what will it take for someone to do that? We'll let Sami build, and then we'll end with Marek.
Okay, my one that's on my mind a lot at the moment is to like phrase the UX of apps and frame the UX of apps in a like and like towards the end user case. So like, what is it that person actually wants to do? Do they want to send money? Do they want to earn money? Do they want to trade something? Like frame it in that kind of wording, and then abstract all that stuff away from them. That's my thing that's on my mind right now.
I love that. Almost like design thinking, kind of like.
Yeah, I agree, and maybe just to add to that, Sami mentioned that most dApps that he's seen start off, thinking about the desktop, and then eventually try to scale it down to mobile. And if you read Luke Wróbelski's book called Mobile First, highly recommend it. Basically the whole book talks about how even if you're building for desktop, you're gonna have a better product if you start by designing for mobile first and then scale up the design. And that's the whole idea behind building mobile first, is you're literally designing and building the mobile product first before you do the desktop one. And I think in a world where everyone's looking to expand their user base and to reach more people in a Web3, building with those intentional use cases, or building intentionally with those use cases in mind, like Sami mentioned, I think is critical. And then building for where those users are, which is mobile, is equally important. And so that's what I'm excited for the future of Web3 is for Web3 to finally lead Web2 in this one and critical way, which is building for mobile.
Amazing. Love that. Thank you.
Awesome.
Well, I learned so much from this conversation. I always learn so much from our guests. Thank you, Marek, so much. I know the audience is going to benefit from this as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was wonderful.